Hello, and welcome to Carey Theological College's online learning orientation. My name is Cameron Weinberg, and I work in the Teaching and Learning Department. You will probably interact with me and other members of my team through email most of the time, but I wanted to take this opportunity to engage with you in this more personal setting. For some of you, this may be your first introduction to online learning. Others may have taken an online course in the past, and you may assume what is expected of you. Or you may have taken an online course at another school, but not quite sure what to expect from Carey, especially if you've heard terms such as problem-based learning, student-centered learning, or case studies. Hopefully this video will give you an idea of what these terms mean at Carey and help prepare you for your future as a student at Carey. In a large proportion of courses, there isn't much thought given over to questions of context or location of the teaching that is taking place. Think through the last formal educational experience you had and ask yourself, where did the experience happen? Who were the people that composed the students? What time of day did it take place? And then ask yourself, did any of that truly matter to the course's design? How much of the course's design would have changed if it happened in the morning instead of the evening? How much of the course's design would have changed if the students were an entirely different group of people? How much would change if it was in one room rather than another? I would guess, and you may agree, that it didn't matter very much. This is also true of many online courses as well, and maybe more so. The enticement of online courses is the ability of students to learn anywhere, anytime, any way they can, no matter their location or context. However, we at Carey don't think of online learning in quite that way. Instead, we're highly interested in the where, the when, and the how. And in this video, I'd like to talk with you about a few practical details. You are probably already aware of the importance of your context as described in the 5 C's of Carey's curricula design. But it is important that we think about the more practical aspects of your context as well, and I mean very practical. It can be really easy to assume a common way of thinking, speaking, and acting with others when we spend most of our time in a similar context. For instance, here in Vancouver, the phrase, "I might grab an Evo instead of the 99" would be easily understood by many people. But even just outside the city limits, this statement starts to become complete gibberish. Or someone presenting the exegetical and hermeneutical implications of Hosea 2:1 on ecclesiology might not necessarily attract a lot of people at first. All of us easily fall into common vernacular or speech patterns with those around us. But it's important to remember that Carey's online accessibility not only means you might hear from many global voices, it also means you might need to communicate with people from entirely different contexts and maybe even entirely different educational backgrounds. Whether in a discussion forum, working on a group assignment, or having an informal chat, try to be aware of how your context may have shaped the way you approach the subject. When you might disagree with someone, or when you've been introduced to a different way of looking at the topic, take time to reflect on why it might be different, what causes you to see a certain way. In our day and age, being aware of how our context has shaped us usually comes with a negative attachment of bias or needing to be aware of our blind spots. But if we take the time to reflect on our past learning experiences and are better able to articulate why we approach any given context the way we do, you may experience a moment of learning that is deeper than any book you might read in your entire graduate experience. Another practical note is also to think about the physical space you are learning in. It may be enticing to think you can do your coursework on the couch, in your bed, outside at a park, or at a friend's house. While it is true you can learn in any of these places, it would be good to spend some time thinking about the distractions that might also arise in these places, as well as your own subconscious responses to them. It may be tempting to study on the couch, but you may also find yourself distracted by dirty dishes in the kitchen, or a small task that could be quickly accomplished, or maybe even by people in the room. Aha, I'll go to my bedroom then, you might think. But you may find yourself wanting to take a nap, or worse, associating your bed with the place where coursework needs to be done, and thus ruining your much-needed sleep. This isn't to say you should create some isolated, impregnable bunker from any distractions. But it is worthwhile to spend some time thinking about the space you have chosen to work in and attempting to minimize any distractions or negative implications that would come with it. Even just being aware of what might be a distraction may heighten your resistance to it being a distraction in the end. And since we're talking about bedrooms, let's talk about the win of learning. If you are like many other Carey students, you may already have various other responsibilities that take up your time. And you may sometimes feel like you are having to squeeze in your coursework at the end of the day or whenever you get around to it. Making space and time in your day to work on an assignment may feel impossible, or you may feel like you do perfectly acceptable work at the end of the day. And for some of you that may be true, but this may come off sounding a little rude, but maybe what you think is acceptable is mediocre, at best. It never hurts to spend some time in personal reflection on the time of day you were at your best for certain tasks. Now, I acknowledge that sometimes jobs and other responsibilities might make it difficult to adjust your schedule to the most efficient times for you to study. But you may find that doing your readings at night, waking up a little early in the morning to write an assignment works better for you, rather than trying to do it all in one night. Or maybe even waking up a little early to read, spending all day thinking about what you read and why it matters, and then write a response at night helps you to really refine your thoughts and produce better work. Also, think about your fellow classmates in your planning. Maybe you're really grouchy in the mornings. Don't engage in discussions until you've had a cup of coffee or you've just woken up. Maybe you start getting incoherent at night. Don't engage in discussions until you've had a good night of sleep. Now, if all of this sounds like a lot of planning, good, because online learning doesn't easily fit into a weekly schedule like a face-to-face course would, so students can often fall into a "I'll do it later" mentality, and then later becomes 1 week before your 15-page paper is due. But online learning's flexibility also means you can work around your own schedule more than you might have been able to in a traditional setting. You'll notice that we emphasize planning ahead in some of our tips for online learning. A lot of success in an online setting comes from good time management and setting up good, healthy, sustainable rhythms in your life. If you can set a good schedule, then the how of learning can easily fall into place. The how of learning isn't so much a practical matter, so much as a raising of awareness of the learning process. Even today, the conversation around how people learn is still heavily argued. Is learning a purely psychological process, or can we learn through our hands? If there is no teacher, can people still learn something? Are textbooks really necessary for learning, or can learning happen without ever opening a book? And I'm sure some students would like to hear the truth of that. Regrettably, I'm not going to tackle all of these questions in depth in this video, but if those questions interest you, might I interest you in the field of philosophy of education? No? At Carey, we acknowledge that our students are adults, often with jobs, maybe families, but most assuredly adults with their own experiences, stories, and thoughts. So you may hear the term student-centered or learner-centered pedagogy used around at Carey. While this is true in the common definition of the term, it may be best to say we inhabit a learner-centered andragogy. Let me break those down. A learner-centered approach, sometimes also called student-centered, is a shift from traditional approaches, often called teacher-centered, where the teacher is seen as sort of the expert with all of the knowledge who then doles it out to the students who are seen as retainers of this knowledge. Another common phrase is the sage on the stage. However, in a learner-centered approach, the learners are seen as co-teachers, bringing their own knowledge and wisdom to the learning experience, co-sharing with the teacher who is now seen as a fellow student in the midst of the process. If you've ever sat in a class and thought, yeah, the teacher sounds smart, but he or she doesn't really know what it's like out in the field, then you've probably experienced a frustration with the teacher-centered approach. At Carey, our teachers are meant to be facilitators alongside you in your learning, to help guide you along and introduce other ways of looking at an issue, rather than speaking as the voice of God telling you how to think about it. In the same way, Carey also designates the difference between pedagogy, where peda means children, and a relatively newer term, andragogy, where andra actually means adult. Because the majority of students in a seminary are adults, this means that most of our students are already self-directed. They have a sense of personal motivation and probably already feel a personal calling to ministry. It's why you're at a seminary and not a different program altogether. So don't be surprised if it sometimes feels like your teachers aren't telling you what to think, or that you feel like you are sometimes co-teaching on a topic you might have some experience with. And don't feel afraid to ask questions of your instructors if something doesn't sit right with you. And don't be surprised if you find you've stumped your teacher. Even more so, you should feel comfortable asking about your entire program overall. As an adult, you have the opportunity to shape your courses to better help and equip you for ministry. But don't wait around for someone at Carey to ask you if you would like to do so. Take any chance you get to look over your degree program and reflect on what opportunities you might like to explore, what areas you might be weak in, and what new possibilities might be ahead of you. In this video, I have hopefully introduced you to a few of the ways that Carey is slightly different from the traditional experiences you may have had in formal education. We think it is important that our teachers and students think about where they learn, that is, taking stock of their context and physical location, when they learn, the importance of scheduling and creating sustainable rhythms, and how they learn, the self-directed and collaborative nature of our curriculum. While it may take a bit to get used to this different model of education, we think it can be invigorating once you've settled in, and we hope you come out of your degree not just with a head full of knowledge, but with tools, methods, and new creative ways to tackle problems that will arise in your ministry setting.